Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Prodromou has ordered me to keep it short and sweet, so I won't be long. I'm here on behalf of Deportivo Publishing Quality Learning Material. Dr. Luke Prodromou is one of the authors of Sprint, the new ELI coursebook. We are very proud to be sponsoring Dr. Prodromou, and I would also like to introduce you to this presentation, to this creative presentation. I hope you will enjoy it. So, he's all yours.
Thank you, Aditi. You said keep it short and sweet. All right, Aditi, have you finished?
Yes.
Can I have a go now? All right. Thank you very much, Aditi. Can you all see me? Can you see me here?
Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? What about your eyes? Okay. Shall we have an eye test? The people sitting right at the back. Can you see the board? Can you read the first sentence on the board? Ano? Are your classes new? How much do they cost? Mine are new as well. Are they multifocals? Can you read the first sentence? Handing, that's you. I'm not a ventriloquist. Come on, you've got a microphone. Don't be shy, he's shy. Well, can you see what it says? Let's do it together. Handing in, all together. Handing in, all together we say. 1, 2, 3. So you can see it. Okay, that's enough. That's enough. What a terrible drill. So, you can all see. The question I'm going to ask you is to go right to the end, the last phrase, and just look at the last word. What's the last word there? That's what the optician says. Can you read the last number or the last word? What is the last word, everybody? And. My question then is, and what? And what does she say? Is this Lucy or the other one? What? That's her name. It's not Lucy. It's Peppermint? Patty. Okay. We'll come back to her at the end. So remember, what's her name? Peppermint Patty. Okay. We're going to answer the question, and what? And what is this? What is this? But behind the question mark, there is something else, which I've heard at this conference already a couple of times. What does it stand for? What does the speaker expect of you when you see this sign? To think. Good, I like that. Yes, I do want you to think. But once you've thought, what are you going to do with your thoughts? You're going to help me. You're going to give me your thoughts, and we're going to interact. So it's interactive. Don't leave me on my own here. It's very, I was going to say very lonely. For those of you who came to this presentation on time, you will have noticed there was a song playing in the background, which we're now going to bring into the foreground. Can you remember that song, those of you who were here on time? What's the first line of that song then? Clever. Oh, you heard it about 10 times. You should know. Who can tell me what was the first line of this famous song? Let's tell them what the song is for the latecomers. This is a mixed level group. We have some latecomers. Let's help them. Let's not ignore them. What was the song? Eleanor Rigby. Hands up if you don't know this song. Never heard Eleanor Rigby. Okay, let's fill in the information gap. What is the first line of this famous song by the Beatles? How does it begin? It's a kind of exclamation. It's not that. Before that, there is 1, 2, 3. Everybody. And then he says, look at all the lonely people. And if you see a lot of lonely people, what do you do? If you are surrounded by lonely people, imagine. Take them in your arms right now. Hug somebody next to you. Let's do a Mario Rimbalou because I missed him desperately. Mario would say, give everybody a hug. Okay, give everybody. All the lonely people. Look at all the lonely people. Okay. So you're already beginning to interact with him. If he doesn't want to hug you, I'll hug you later when you're alone. Don't tell him. Okay. First question then. When you see that sign, it means we interact. I'm going to flash back to last year's TESOL Greece. Hands up if you were not here. Well, we're going to fill you in a manner of speaking. This is, what's her name? Johanna. Okay, and she is an expert on our subject today. Do you know she wrote a book, a brilliant book called The Power of Tests. So I'm going to begin by going back to this great teacher, trainer, and writer on many things, including our subject today, which is tests and making them creative. As you look at what she says, Johanna, in her book, The Power of Tests, choose 3 words which you consider key words to understanding the relationship between testing and teaching in our work and the importance of this relationship. Which 3 words would you choose?
Anxiety.
Which one?
The first one is anxiety for me.
Anxiety. Yes, we associate testing or teaching with anxiety. I should say good teaching. Do you associate anxiety with testing? Hands up. I know you're shy. So most people associate anxiety in all its shapes and forms with testing in all its shapes and forms. But with good teaching, we would not. A good teacher doesn't make students feel anxious, not in a negative way anyway. That's one word. Another one. We said 3. Yes, Maria?
Obsessed with.
Well, that's 2 words. Yeah, that's cheating. Obsessed. Okay, let's take obsessed. Maria says obsessed. And would you say that the country we are in now is obsessed with exams? Greece is absolutely, totally obsessed with this paper chase, this never-ending chase for pieces of paper. A necessary part of our work. And it's not going to go away. So let's make the best of it, which is what we're going to do today. Another word.
Self-worth.
Self-worth. A synonym for self-worth is self-esteem. Do we associate testing with giving students self-esteem or self-worth? It tends to threaten. When you do well, clearly your self-esteem goes up. But I think probably the default position, and fault being the key word, is probably most people feel anxious and threatened, particularly as regards their self-esteem, when they have to take a test or an important exam. Do we agree so far? So all of these words are key words. You've surprised me. Surprise me again. Give me another one. Yes, George?
Influence.
Influence. This is influence. The influence, I won't ask George to speak, we have to start roving around and we'll run out of time. What I'm interested in today is the influence of testing on the way we teach. This is called technically, do you know what it's called, anybody? The washback or the backwash effect. In a sense, that's what we're talking about. Okay? How the importance of exams, the shape they take, their importance shapes what we do very often as teachers. Okay, that's washback or backwash. Το αντίκτυπο, as we say in Greek, of testing on teaching. One more, then we'll move on. Yes, Pascalia.
Measurement.
Measurement. This is crucial. I'm glad you mentioned it. Because clearly measurement goes with testing. And teaching is not a situation in which we measure. Because measuring implies that we are comparing and contrasting people. In tests we have to do it. It's a necessary evil, let's call it, or it's the way tests work. They can't work any other way if they're going to be reliable and discriminate in the best sense of the word. But when we're teaching, we behave differently, don't we? Do we go around measuring students into how good they are? No, we don't. So this quotation, I think, is a very nice place to be in. Now, time to put this into practice. I'm going to give you a test now to see how it feels. Those are the test questions, and I want you to cheat. You're allowed to cheat. You have only 1.5 minutes to answer these questions, and then I'll check your answers. Okay, so turn to your partner again. You don't have to hug them, but if you've changed your mind, Manolis, and you want to hug afterward, you can now hug her as you do this test. You have 1 minute, 30 seconds. Answer the questions as quickly as you can. You can make a noise. I'll let you make a noise. Okay. Okay, put your pencils down. No more writing, please. Anything you write now or say will not be taken into consideration. You will not be given any marks for it. And you may actually make mistakes. So only do exactly as you are instructed. Honest? Put your pen down. Thank you. Okay, this in effect is our lesson plan today. Okay, I'm really asking not 6 questions, it's 3 broad questions. What is testing? What is creativity? And how do we put the 2 together? But these 6, they kind of break it down. And I'll ask you to interact with me to help me answer the questions now that you've had 1.5 minutes to prepare yourselves to interact with me as we go through. So we're going to go through them one by one. The first one is, what do students say about tests? I'll give you some real quotations, things that students have actually said. Let's begin with our students, or candidates as they call, in the other situation. And as you see these words, I want you to tell me the F words. Do you know what an F word is, everybody? I won't ask you to shout one out, because it's rude. But you know what an F word is? Yes. Okay, they usually have 4 letters, but mine have more. In the first one, what is the F word? Feel. The importance of feeling in producing a bad result for a student. The importance of feelings, emotions, when we are teaching well, the way we engage students' emotions. A lot has been said about this, so I won't bore you with it, but there it is. The students themselves are telling us, look, don't forget my feelings. F word number 1. In the second one, what is an F word there? And it's a 4-letter F word, fail. You see, the whole issue around tests is, of course, the potential for failure, to fail. And this is the root of a lot of the difficulties students face, not only when they're taking tests, but when they are learning outside the testing situation. Another F word, fault. They feel guilty, their responsibility in the hands of a bad teacher, let's say. But that's how they feel, that when they fail, they feel guilty. And another F word at the end is, the last one, fluke. Now don't be rude, F Luke, that's me, but I know what you're thinking. Stop those thoughts now, because I can read your thoughts and you get bad marks for them. Okay, a fluke, what's a synonym of fluke? Hey, gone afro. I knew you'd get all excited. Stop it. A fluke is when you do something by chance. It's luck. Is there an element of luck in testing, which students are anxious about? Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but there's an element of luck. Okay? Whereas it's not a concept which is important in teaching so much. Number 3, and a big F word there, is defect is one, of course. The defects in me. It makes students feel inferior, they feel weak, they feel vulnerable when they don't do well in tests. And why? The other F word here, the longer one, is difficulties. A characteristic of tests, almost as a defining feature, is the way they make things difficult. Almost as if it's part of the whole pedagogy, the ideology of tests, that they have to be difficult, or they're perceived as difficult. This is what the students say. And I'm learning Spanish, or have been trying to for many years. I invented a new Spanish verb, I think it's a new one, into English, I mean. A good teacher makes things easier. What's a synonym of to make things easier? We teachers are facilitators. The bad teacher, or the tester in disguise, does the opposite, to defacilitate, to make things difficult. And that's when the teacher is behaving like a tester. You see what I mean? The last one, number 4. Failure, we've seen that. And of course the final one, we mentioned self-esteem. There you go, those are the F words. And they tell us from the voice of the students why this issue is so important in both testing and teaching. Because my whole point, my whole argument is that there is a washback effect. And I think it's established and accepted that the way we test affects the way we teach and the way we learn. Another student who is going to give us some very valuable information is this little boy. Your question here is, who is he? He is my son, my sunshine, I call him. And when he was younger than he is here, when he was in primary school, even younger, he's about 11 here. But when he was in primary school, I asked him to write down for me what he thought of tests. That was a long time ago. So you see how long I've been obsessed with tests, Maria. This is what he wrote. You can read that, everybody? No? Well, let's help you. Okay, let's help them. At the top it says, Αυτά που δεν πρέπει να κάνουν, αλλά τα κάνουν. These are the teachers, and when they behave like testers. So my theory comes from this 8-year-old boy who says, I won't ask you to do it because it's a large room and you can't hear each other, but we need for our visitors to explain what this little boy says. He says, the things teachers should do, should not do, but do. And the first thing they shouldn't do is λένε πως έχουμε λίγη ώρα και το επαναλαμβάνουν. They say we have a little time. You don't have a lot. How much time did I give you for the test? 1.5 minutes. And this is typical. You don't have much time. You must work quickly. And he says they keep repeating it. You can imagine the effect on the poor little boy. Okay, this is an example of facilitating, isn't it? You don't have much time. Whereas in teaching, as we shall see, time behaves differently in good teaching. Number 2, λένε πως το τεστ είναι δύσκολο. The test is, they say, these bad teachers, they say the test is going to be difficult. You see what I mean? Difficilitating. He is the originator of the theory. And I owe a lot to Professor Michael Prodromou. Okay, it's going to be difficult, and ότι και θα είναι αυστηροί στη βαθμολογία. They're going to be strict in their marking. You see it? What effect does this have on the candidate student? The third thing he says, λένε ότι μόλις πάρουμε άσχημους βαθμούς, when we get bad marks, θα φάμε ξύλο. We shall eat wood.
Come on.
The synonym in English for eating wood is we're going to be beaten. Θα φάμε ξύλο. From our parents, that's me. He's talking about me then. That's me. I know he's talking about me. But it's not true. I never hit him. I never. It wasn't me. Ακόμα λένε ότι από το τεστ θα εξαρτηθεί η βαθμολογία μας. The tests will also decide our marks, our grade. So it's important. Measurement, you see? Measurement from the beginning in primary school. And it's even younger now. They start even younger. And finally, delos. Όταν μοιράζουν τα τεστ λένε πώς πήγατε χάλια και λένε κοροϊδευτικά να τα μαργαριτάρια σας. So when they give back the tests, they make fun of us. And as they hand the test, it's so vivid. The little boy says, the teachers say, and here are your pearls. Those are pearls that were his eyes. I threw a pearl away, richer. But this pearl is not a pearl. It means here is your rubbish, your crap. Okay? This is a nice way to boost the students' self-worth, don't you think? Their self-esteem. For our visitors, here it is in English. There you go. And as we go through, you'll see that this intuition of a primary school child is confirmed again and again by serious research. Yes? It was actually quite a good school. It depends on the teacher, doesn't it? There you go. Let's go on to our second strand. I said third is what is creative. Now this morning I went to a very interesting, I missed the opening plenary, and I want you to tell me, before I come to the next slide, is what did I miss this morning, having apologized for sleeping in because I wanted to be fresh for this talk. But what did Nikki say about the nature of creativity? Can anybody who was there tell us one thing she said? Professor Hockley? There was nobody listening. Come on, somebody was there. Yes. Stand up and shout.
She said, the more you use it, the more you have.
The more you use creativity, the more you have it. So practice being creative. I heard from the Croatian lady, is she here? From Croatia? She's not here. She gave a talk on linguistic creativity this morning, which I went to. And she talked about two kinds of creativity. First, she mentioned your thing about creativity. She said other things which you had said, and I wanted to include them. Can you tell us briefly?
It's universal, so everybody has it. It's plural in that there's no one correct way to do things. It thrives on constraints.
Kind of rule government kind of thing. No.
Structures.
Okay.
What else? I can't remember. There's a couple
Well,
more
thank
ones.
you. I just wanted to connect because the colleague from Croatia mentioned what you said, and I was interested in what she herself said. And she said that there's the little c and the big C. So, can you guess what these two kinds of creativities are? Well, she said, well, the other way of describing them is historical creativity. She referred to great discoveries, Nobel Prizes, famous people, and I would say, yes, this historical creativity is when we're thinking of geniuses like Beethoven, like the Beatles, and so on. But there's the other one, the little c, is what I call personal creativity. You see? And it's probably what, Nicky, you were referring to. Everyday creativity. Everyday. Personal creativity. And we can practice it every day. And that's the one I'm focusing on. But I want us to understand creativity, so we'll look at both of them. Okay, you ready for the test? Shakespeare's sonnets. What kind of creativity is this? Big or small? It's the big one. It's the historical creativity. You see, the definition was something original and valuable by general consensus. The world says he was a genius, he was creative. Beethoven's music, Paul McCartney's lyrics, look at all the lonely people and so on. Luke's holiday snapshot. I'm honored. No, it's not. It's personal. It's very much a little c. And finally, a painting by Frida Kahlo. So that's the basic distinction. And we'll look at later in a practical way, what exactly do these people do? But first I want you to tell me, because it was one of your questions, an example of your own personal creativity. When you talk, did you get round to mentioning something? Anybody? Personal creativity? Anybody? You can choose from these areas. Yes?
I just wanted to say that something had started as personal creativity and then become this.
Of course, yes. Yes, I just wanted your examples now, that's true. I wanted you to remind yourselves, as Nicky, I think, would have liked, to remind yourselves that you too are creative. Hands up if you're creative in a theatrical sense. Recently, you've done something theatrical, like acting, directing, writing. Agreed. Manolis, you're a very good actor. Your Jack Worthing is brilliant. Not as good as mine, but keep us. Music. Anybody musical? Hands up. Creative in a musical sense. Poetry. Hands up. Photography. Hands up. Painting. Do you paint, anybody? So you see, there is every kind of creativity and other kinds in this room. I'll give you an example of mine, personal creativity. There it is. It's not mine. It's one of my masterpieces. It's a holiday snapshot, but I rather like it. And if you can be serious for a moment, and you think what it is that makes it possibly creative. What are the mechanics of this original piece of photography? Because it is a small C example, I agree, but it does illustrate the definition which we're going to come back to of creativity and then apply it to language teaching and testing. So, this is an example of the other one, though, historical creativity. And as you look at these three pictures, I want you to tell me what you noticed about them. What do they have in common? Okay, they're historical, we agree on that. The next step, what do they have in common? As photographs. They're all in groups. I don't know if, Nick, if you mention the collaborative nature of creativity, the cooperative nature, the collective nature. And every one of these pictures shows how Beethoven did not do it on his own. He stood on the shoulders, as they say, of his predecessors. Haydn, Mozart, and the third one? Bach. And similarly, Shakespeare didn't do it on his own. We actually know there is a very official analysis now of the work, which talks about the collaborative nature of Hamlet, of King Lear, of all of Shakespeare's plays. He stood on the shoulders of Christopher Marlowe, Ben Jonson, John Marston, and all his great, great colleagues in the theatre of the time. This is important when we come to pedagogy. And finally, Paul McCartney is a member of the Beatles. So remember that, the collective nature, the group collaborative nature of creativity when we come to pedagogy. Another example of my own personal creativity, which illustrates the collaborative nature, is poetry. I write poetry, as you can see. And what kind of poems do I write? Who do I collaborate with? I'm not a sole individual genius, you know, inspired. I think my colleague Lilika wants to say something. Who was my collaborator, because I didn't do it all on my own, when I wrote this brilliant poetic masterpiece?
Cavafis.
Have you heard of Cavafis, anybody? Konstantinos Cavafis, wonderful, great 20th century poet. Okay, and this is my poem, which I did in collaboration with Mr. Cavafis, and I should acknowledge his cooperation here. And for you, it's a test. Let's go through it, and when I stop at a gap, I want you to fill in the gap. What are we waiting for assembled in the lecture hall? The examiners are coming today. Why isn't anything going on in the classrooms? Why are the teachers sitting here without teaching? Because the examiners are coming today. What's the point of teachers giving tests? Rules now. Once the examiners are here, they will set or make. They won't destroy the rules, they will make the rules. So that's my example of a personal piece of creativity in collaboration with somebody else. And it also talks about this relationship of testing and teaching. You see what it's saying? That we often say, I can't teach the way I want to. I want to be creative. I want to engage them and get interaction and imagination, but we have the tests. Agreed? This is very familiar, isn't it? Our fig leaf, I call it. And it's understandable, and my job here today, with colleagues who I know have done similar things, is to say you can have both. You can have your cake and eat it. Some of the time. Because some of the time you just have to carry on with the drudgery of testing and preparing for exams to get good results, because the results are important. They're our bread and butter, I acknowledge. So what is this difference between testing and teaching? I'm going to call out some defining features of tests and the teaching effectively, and you have to tell me which category they go in. So for example, when I say, I think I have an example here. Yeah, competition, do you agree, is a defining feature of the assessment testing situation. Not in a good classroom, unless you're playing a game, just for the fun of it, and you want to provide extrinsic motivation. But normally, a good teacher encourages collaboration and building on each other's knowledge. Okay, you know what, positive. Cooperation is therefore characteristic. Now, what if I say cheating, testing, feedback, giving feedback, giving marks? Well, compare it to marks. If marks goes with testing, feedback may go with teaching. Diversity, taking into account diversity. Uniformity. Error as terror. Error as a step in learning. Humor, a sense of humor. Have you ever seen any funny tests, any amusing tests? Solemnity. Sharing. And so on. So you see that pattern there. That's how I would sum up the two roles, the two macro roles that we play when we are testers, officially or unofficially. We behave in the red column, and sometimes we have to do that. And a lot of tests, when it's sit down and write, you know, the stakeholder, the big important tests, we have no choice. That's the way they are. There's no room for jokes. It's serious. You've got to do well. And there's the good teacher doing that kind of thing. Do you agree, more or less? Okay. Let's look at creative geniuses. What do they do exactly? Now, we can be more specific now about Beethoven, Mozart, and all the rest of them. Who is this guy? Your first test? Anybody? Great Greek philosopher? Everything flows. Heraklitos, very good. And he said, and this will help us pedagogically, that's why I quote him, a wonderful harmony arises from joining the seemingly unconnected. Joining the seemingly unconnected. Think about that in terms of linguistic creativity, which our Croatian colleague was talking about this morning. Think about painting, think about metaphor in poetry, connecting things which surprise you and they get your attention. That's a nice starting point, I think. The principle of harmony through connecting things which you don't expect to be connected. And this one is David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, and he uses these 4 words. Compounding, which means something like connecting things again, putting 2 things together, let's say transposing, moving things around, exchanging positions from one place to another, augmenting, synonym, increasing, think of hyperbole in poetry, think of the final movement of a symphony as things get really loud and, majestic and so on. And finally the opposite, diminishing, what's the word, you know what I mean? Underestimating, that's another word.
Undermine.
Reducing, well, give an example. Okay, all in all, these 4 things by David Hume I call the principle of transformation, of changing one thing into another. Okay, so let's look at examples. Who is this? Frida Kahlo. Who is this? It's again Frida Kahlo. What has she done? Can you see how this definition by Heraklitos and David Hume really works? Some of these principles. What has she done? She's gone from her real self in the photograph. What changes has she made? Has she connected things that you don't expect to be connected? Is there something there which surprises you? A monkey? What's a monkey doing there? Hand round her neck? It looks like a snake. It's not, but you see how clever she is? So is she exaggerating anything? She's augmenting which parts of her body? Her eyebrow, her neck. Like El Greco does this as well. This elongating of people's bodies, and Modigliani, I think. Who's Modigliani? I think? Who's the Modigliani? He's the one. That's the chap. You see how these principles work? Joining the seemingly unconnected, compounding and augmenting. And I think she's actually, with her lips, what's she done to her lips? Look, she's augmented them. Has she diminished anything? Look at her eyes. She's made her eyes a bit smaller. Isn't that interesting? When you analyze exactly what she's doing. This is going to be useful when we come to pedagogy, I promise you. Let's come back to the examples. Who is this? He's a sweetie, isn't he? Well, he's the inspiration, according to most scholars, of Shakespeare's sonnets, including this one, most of Shakespeare's sonnets. So he is the figure who is addressed in the famous sonnet, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date." So, what has Shakespeare done? He's comparing, connecting 2 very different things. They've got this young, effeminate man, the Earl of Southampton, one of the richest and most powerful nobles in England at the time, and Shakespeare seems to have been half at least in love with him, whether platonically or physically is a moot point, it's debated. Okay, but look what he's doing. He's comparing 2 different things. And he's exaggerating. Thou art more lovely, more temperate. He's exaggerating, but to good effect. That's the beauty, the harmony that Heraklitos talks about. Connecting things which are seemingly unconnected, compounding, bringing 2 things together, combining them, agreed? And exaggerating, and perhaps the other things. There you go. So we're moving then from the principles of creativity as they're applied on an everyday basis, our personal creativity. We're looking at the geniuses to see what we can learn from them. Well, what was the first line again? All together, 1, 2, 3. Look at all the lonely people. you want to give them a hug again now? You can, discreetly give each other a hug, if you think the person next to you is feeling alone. But how did Paul McCartney do it? How did he... Do you know, anybody know the origin of Eleanor Rigby? I want to illustrate again how this process of creativity worked in this beautiful song. And he tells us how it happened. I think I should shut up and let you just read that and the next slide. Let's remind ourselves.
Costa, esse aqui é comigo. Ah, se precisasse. Just pulling your leg.
How many minutes, Anna, do we have? That's great. It's about right. So you see, does the theory of connecting the seemingly unconnected, compounding, what does the T stand for? Transposing, moving things around. A was augment, and D, diminish. Isn't it beautiful? What a lovely song. Look how it began. So, that's just by the way. Let's move to the classroom, shall we, the last 15 minutes, shall we? So we put these things together, the testing and the creativity, and apply it to language teaching and preparing students for exams. Our objective is to make our learning memorable, engaging, interactive, so they get good marks, because the good marks are our bread and butter. We want them to get good marks. We want them to get a grade A for a number of reasons, not least the financial implications for us. Okay. So, I'll give you two examples. This is the original from, I think it's the Cambridge exams. Gap filling, you're very familiar. Is it engaging? Is it interesting? Do you want to know more?
No.
You might do, because there's a nice CLIL element here, isn't there? It happens to be one of the more interesting texts that I came across. And sometimes there are interesting texts which you can exploit. And this stuff about Columbus is potentially good CLIL stuff, and a good way of going beyond the classroom into the real world, which is when real teaching takes fire, and our educational practice connects the classroom with the real world. But if you had to compare this with this text, and I tell you that this was a text written by no, by a student, of course. This is Scott Thornbury and Dogme, or learner input as I call it, using what the students bring and building the lesson. And here it's building testing practice on what the students give you. And I said to these students, find a painting you like. There's a painting she liked. Write a text about it. Give it to me. Bring me the painting. Have it in class as a poster or a calendar. That's usually where they got them from. And the internet. I corrected the mistakes. I gapped the text, so it's perfectly correct now. And we did the revision of the students' text, which became a test. First of all, she told us about it. She used the text as her prompt to tell the class why she liked this painting. Okay? And then the students asked questions. And the kind of summary was this gap filling, but accompanied by the painting. Now you can see what elements vary from this to this, where you involve the learners, you involve a great image in this case, which gives power, which gives memorability. And it's all in English, and it's getting the student to speak, and she sees her speaking take written form, so we're transforming, we're compounding things, okay? And I hope it was memorable for her, particularly, and for the students, to see their own peers initiating part of the lesson. Porque poi, now and again, de vez en cuando, as we say, don't we, in Madrid? Okay. This one, which is more memorable, which is more engaging, which is likely to stick. Would you like to talk about these two pictures? Shall I get you in pairs to compare and contrast? Hands up if you're really desperate to talk about these pictures. They're authentic, they're from an exam, as you probably know. They're specimen papers or whatever they call them. Compared to this. Homework. Find me information about who? Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, however you pronounce it. It's an example. These two pictures, though, are they going to engage more? Do people like the story of Vincent? I think so. It's engaging, isn't it? And moving and important in our culture, in the West at least, if not universally, as you said. So I think if you put them in pairs,